child, and it also combines all of the minds of the previous Reverend Mothers to the child. Kind of hard to explain.
And that all happens in like the second part of the book.
Yeah.
Okay, that seems kind of crucial. Like,
and just like for our listeners who are not aware, Dune did get picked up for part 2. It's in pre-production right now, and they said that it's supposed to come out around like 2023.
mm-hmm.
But like, I feel like that's a really long gap, and if something's like crucial, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of disconnect. Are you like worried at all about like the transition between the two?
I am, especially because in the book, between parts 2 and 3, there's like a 2-year time jump.
Oh.
And if they don't have the last part of part 2, since they didn't have it, they're going to need to find a way to put it into that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's because like the runtime is long.
Yes.
Like this movie is 2.5 hours long, but I like totally see what you mean. Like that does seem like really important, and then that would make more sense with the time gap. Oh, that would have been cool if they kept that in though,
Yeah,
because
it'd be, like,
it
real
would
time.
actually be 2 years in
Yeah.
between. I think like the world of Dune is like supposed to be set like many millennia in the future to a point where it becomes like fantastical, like a more of a fantasy.
Yep.
But it is supposed to be like our universe, just many
It is.
millennia ahead.
Yeah. The Earth is mentioned in the book several times.
Oh, really?
So,
That's cool. Are people like still on Earth? Like in the
I don't know.
yeah,
No,
okay.
sorry.
That's fine. There's a lot
people-
happening.
The people who are on Earth are actually still watching the Dune movie because it's simply that long.
Okay, so this film is actually, you know, like Andy said, it's Dune Part 1, and it serves to set up the cinematic universe. So it was mostly world building and introducing characters, and that brings me to the reviews of this movie. Like the biggest complaint that I saw was that like not a lot of plot happens. Like it's a lot of setting things up for future movies. And like one big complaint I saw was about Chani? The Freeman character, Fremen. There are so many words I'm going to mispronounce. I'm sorry. The Fremen character played by Zendaya. So she was in all the posters, in all the trailers. Zendaya's star power was like used really heavily in marketing, only for her to have roughly 7 minutes of screen time. And I saw some people making jokes saying it was perfume ad acting because like 90% of her role wasn't speaking. It was all the visions that Paul was having. So it was her like slow-mo looking into the camera, like smoldering. And I think that was like frustrating for viewers that wanted to see Zendaya. But I do understand that like Chani and the Fremen become a much bigger part like in the rest of the book. And so this movie is setting up for like the other parts of the series. Like how big of a role does Chani actually have?
Well, in the first 2 parts of the book, she's barely in it. Actually, in the movie, they added her more than she was in that part of the book. But in the 3rd part, she's Paul's concubine.
Mm-hmm. So like a much larger role.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. What did you guys think about it? Like, did you think like enough like plot happened? I think like for 2 hours there was a lot of world building, but I mean I enjoyed it.
I really like world building, and just I think it's really fun to kind of dig deep into fantasy worlds, and so I appreciated that. And I thought it was really interesting because a lot of the plot that did happen was kind of based in Paul's visions, and so like what information we were getting was like from the future in some way, which I thought was an interesting way to go about kind of telling the story.
Yeah, I have to agree with Otis. I do really like world building, and especially with something as big and complex and as dense as Dune, I think it's really important for me personally because I didn't watch the 1984, I think, version. I haven't read the books. I played the board game like 2 days after seeing it. Like, I had no knowledge of Dune, so I think it was really necessary, and I also don't really like big like fight scenes, so I appreciate it.
I don't know, what were your opinions?
Well, yeah, a lot of it is politics, kind of like Game of Thrones. Yeah, I think most of it is laying down the groundwork for later movies.
Yeah, totally. I'm gonna be like totally honest. Until like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I thought Dune was just like the new Star Wars movie coming out, because there's like ravenous sandworm monsters. That was in Star Wars. There's like mind control, political commentary. So I thought like, oh, Dune is just like knockoff Star Wars. But upon like doing like the bare minimum of research, it was written like a long time before the first Star Wars movies were even conceptualized. So Star Wars is actually just like knockoff Dune. So that was my bad. But I thought like all the world building was necessary, especially, and I thought like a lot happened. I wish there was subtitles so that I could understand more. The politics is so important. And when I started to research it, there is like so much. Like the synopsises of like some of the Dune books are like really, really long. Like there's a lot of material to cover. So I think they did their best, honestly. I don't know.
For sure.
I definitely wish there was subtitles too. Like a lot of the names I did not get. I did not know his name was Paul. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't know it was Paul. I also didn't know that he was 15. I found that out today, and I was shocked.
I was really surprised too when I only found that out when I was like doing research. I think because they cast like a much older actor. Actually, that was a question I wanted to ask you. Like, what did you think of the casting? Did they like portray the actors? Like, did the actors portray the book characters well? Was there like key differences?
Well, in the book, the way you get to know a lot of the characters is through narration and their thoughts, and the movie doesn't really have very that much narration. So the actors really had to had to do a lot for you to really care about them, and I thought they did a good job.
When you've read or when you are reading Dune, are you more connected to like the characters or the plot, and how do you think that translated in the movie?
I'm more connected to the plot, and I think it did translate to the movie, but yeah, it did.
I think Dune has a lot to say politically. I mean, it's a very like obvious allegory for colonization and like stealing land from native people for resources. The spice that this movie centers around is an important part of Fremen culture. It's like an important part of spirituality, but the Atreides and the Padishah. Sorry, I should really be getting this. They farm it for space travel and monetary gain. I think actually they're not the ones farming it. I think the Harkonnen family are the ones that are doing the actual farming, but they then sell and provide that spice for space travel, which just furthers expansion. So I think it is like, it's an allegory for colonial expansion, and I think that like it had some pretty poignant commentary.
Yeah, and also on that, after seeing the movie, I watched a bit about the backstory of that, and kind of just learning about the books to come. I think that there's also some interesting commentary on like this idea of a savior. I mean, like Paul is not indigenous to Arrakis. And I think I was getting some of that like savior vibes from him, which I didn't really like.
Yeah. White savior trope.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from what I like researched into the further stories, it kind of becomes a critique of that trope, which I'm excited to see whether the movies follow through with that, and where that goes.
I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, I was definitely picking up those vibes, and I was like, I know that it is mainly centered around like space politics and how that reflects our world, but I wasn't sure where it was going to go and if it was going to take a more positive direction, but I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, actually on Dune's politics, like what can you tell us about the Dune universe and its politics that we didn't see in this movie? Because there's like so much. So you could give us like a brief overview about like what's happening.
Well, there are very few computers and there's no robots. because robots were created and they became too advanced, and there was a big war that happened between humans and robots, and luckily the humans won, and they made robots, and any computer that simulates a human mind, they made all of that illegal. The Bene Gesserit, I call them the secret rulers because they're behind a lot of the things that happen in the story.
Okay, that's interesting. I actually didn't even notice the lack of robots, but now that you pointed it out, that's a big difference between the route that it took and the route Star Wars took. Because I think it's fair to say that Star Wars took some heavy inspiration.
Oh yeah, for sure.
For
the
sure.
Bene Gesserit and the Jedi, definitely. A
Yeah,
very
especially with the voice and how it controls.
The Force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually remembered what I was about to say. When you were talking about white saviorism, I think that is where there's a previous, I think an 80s adaptation, a movie adaptation, and I think that's where they really failed because the casting of all the Fremen were white, and it's really integral to the story that they be people of color. I do think that made me a little I don't know. I feel like Zendaya is always the token woman of color casting in Hollywood, and it's really common for her to be cast as woman of color, and this happened with The Greatest Showman too, where she's cast as a woman of color, heavily marketed as star of the movie, and then had very little screen time. I saw some similarities of how Hollywood treated her in both of those scenarios, where she's in all the posters on all the movies because everyone wants to see Zendaya, and then didn't have a lot of screen time. So I really hope, I'm sure according to the Dune story that Johnny will have a bigger role, and I hope they do carry through on that. I feel like it would be impossible for them not to with how they set it up. But yeah, I think that was the one of the fatal flaws of the 80s adaptation that was not successful. And I just, this is just kind of a simple question, but what were you guys' favorite or least favorite scenes in the movie? Otis, do you want to go?
Well, there were a lot of really good scenes, but one that particularly sticks with me, also because I watched an analysis of it with the director kind of explaining the scene, was the box scene where Paul is meeting with one of the Bene Gesserit. That's how you pronounce it, right? Yeah. And she was testing him to see if he was worthy, because there's a whole prophecy thing. Anyways, I feel the way that scene was done was it was just done really well, and the lighting in it, and the way that the camera moved was really good. The shot with the needle by his neck, and it shows that, yeah, it was really good. Also, another scene that stuck with me, just from a cinematic perspective, was the one where the one person comes in the egg-shaped spaceship, and they deliver the scroll. I just thought that was really interesting, and the clashing of all the genres in that movie was really weird to me as well, because it's spacey but also fantastic, and they have scrolls, but also their names are Paul.
Jessica.
I actually, okay, you were talking about the box scene. I think that was a great example of Timothée Chalamet's acting. Obviously he's a very proficient actor, but I do wish upon learning that Paul is supposed to be 15 in this, that imagine how much more sympathetic it would have been to see him go through all of these intense things if it was an actual younger actor. I know there's a lot of restrictions if you're under 18, you can't be on set for that long, so I do understand that. But even having someone that's 18, that looks close enough to 15. Close enough. But I think that would have been more sympathetic. that is such a young protagonist. And I think that naivety, I might have been more sympathetic towards his white saviorism, but the fact that he looks old enough where he should know better to have that sort of ideology was like something that made him less of a sympathetic protagonist.
Yeah, I feel like the narrative would have been so much different if we had any indication that he was supposed to be that young, because like he is still figuring out like what life is like, and then with all these changes, with like moving to like a different planet and like having this role kind of forced onto you of like supposed to be like the next, I don't know,
Messiah.
Yeah. I just feel like it would have been a very different story in my eyes if I had known that he was supposed to be 15, but they might like be making like a cinematic change to be like he's older now in this universe.
But I think they definitely made a choice to have a lot of star power behind this movie. Like almost every actor in it is already like a distinguished actor. They have a good resume. There are a lot of big names in this movie, so I think like casting Timothée Chalamet wasn't like just a mistake they were making. I think they knew that if they cast Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya in something, like the masses will come to watch it. I watched it because I know a lot of the actors in it, like, and I like the things that they've been in. So I do think that was a conscious choice. But when you stay like truer to their age, like it becomes more like sympathetic. It becomes more real. Like a lot of those things, it's intense for like a 15-year-old to experience. Yeah. But I don't know. What were your like favorite, least favorite scenes?
It was also the box scene. I feel like it was really good. If I'm remembering correctly, that was the very first scene of the book, very first chapter. It was it was an introduction to the Bene Gesserit, which are super important to the story, and it really made an impact. I did watch the same analysis video by the director, and he said that he wanted the scene visually to look like a nightmare, and it does. It's very intimidating.
Indy, what was your like favorite, least favorite scenes in this movie?
I mean, I would have to agree with you guys, but also just like generally the cinematography and like the visual aspects of this film was just so interesting to me, because like if you're not even down for like all the space politics, it's still nice to look at. Like I found out that they filmed on location in like an actual desert in Jordan, which was really cool to me because I feel like it made the experience look a lot more realistic, and I feel like I could connect with the world more than if it was just like green or blue screened in and just had like a lot of effects on it, but I felt like that really added to it a lot.
Yeah, I can see like in your notes is located between Jordan and Israel, which I thought was like important because the Fremen take a lot of inspiration from like Islam, like in a space like off of Israeli people, I think. I believe like the author took inspiration from that.
He did.
Yeah, and especially with like their idea of the Messiah that they were giving in this. I think my personal favorite scene was like after Paul had killed that Fremen man, like at the end of the movie. I thought I like appreciated the fact that like a sci-fi like fantasy movie like took the time to acknowledge that like a teenager killing someone is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of times, like I keep comparing this to Star Wars, but like in Star Wars you see Luke just like straight up murdering people left and right, no regret, no like effect on his mental health, not until it's like someone he knows personally dies. But Paul like didn't know this man and it still affected him deeply. Like that is a traumatic experience, and again that's one of those moments where like if that was like a actual child acting that out, like being 15, that is like being a child. It's like close to our age. Like I mean, like are you 15? 14?
Yeah.
And I think like I don't know, that's like very close to our age. Seeing that, like that's a big moment, and the fact that they took the time to acknowledge that and point out like Paul's never took someone's life before, like even though like a lot's going on in that universe, like it is still like human people. And even though he didn't know that Fremen that well, and there was like a lot of aggravation in that scene, like it was still like a very poignant moment for his character. And I thought that was a good way to like end the movie. Like it wasn't exactly like your typical like glorious hero way. Like in a way he had to like sacrifice his innocence. So I thought that was my favorite scene. I don't know.
Also, I just want to touch on another aspect of the movie that I thought was personally so good was the score. The score was done by Hans Zimmer. And for those of you who don't know, he has also done the score for things like Inception, Interstellar,
The Dark Knight, and like so much more. Amazing composer. And like the score was so intense. I've heard some people who really did not like it. They thought it was too much, detracted from the movie. But seeing it in theaters and like having that like surround sound was like so immersive, and I thought it really added a lot to the story. Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice much about the score, honestly. I do wish, though, with such an intense score that they had just provided subtitles. Because even when they were talking in English, there's a lot to keep up with, and it would have been helpful. And I mean, I think they did use subtitles at a few points in the movie. Yeah, they did. I think that was for foreign language only, though. I think, are you guys like okay with talking about your least favorite scenes? Did you have least favorite scenes? Because for me personally, I thought it was really weird, Jessica and Paul's relationships at certain points. Like that was like something about like some of those scenes really turned me off. I was like, oh, I like don't like how close they are being. Like I don't know if the director had a different relationship with their mother, but I like would not mother and son like being that close at some points. I was like uncomfortable. It steered a little far off from like a family dynamic I'm used to seeing.
A little bit too Freud for you?
Yeah, a little too Sigmund Freud for me.
That was really weird. That dynamic was like, what is happening right now? But I mean, I don't know. I wonder if there's like a context to their relationship that's like that might explain some of those scenes, or if it is just
a poor directing choice.
A little weird.
Yeah. That was one thing. And then I think maybe I would excuse some of that more again if it was like a younger boy, but this man is like nearing 30. So for them to be all up on each other, it's a little strange.
Do you all think that this movie would not be getting the hype that it is if it wasn't Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya?
I don't know. I think that really helped them in marketing. I think if they made like good casting choices, it would have like worked really well. Like I think the writing was good. Like they did good writing. And I think as long as they casted good actors, it would have done well. I'm just not sure about marketing. Like star power is so important in marketing.
Yeah, and there's obviously a ton of other really big names in this movie, but I feel like those are the two. To be honest, that's a large reason why I went to go see it. I haven't read the books. I don't have any connection. But they wrote me in, and now I'm here to stay, so.
Yeah, I have a similar experience to that. I was like, I had seen a friend reading the book years ago, and so I had like just some basic idea about it. But I think without Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya in it, it wouldn't have been like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go see Dune. It would have been like, maybe in a couple of years I watch it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a good movie.
Yeah. We committed. We saw it in Cine 1, like, right when it came out.
The people behind us also seem to be enjoying the movie.
Yeah, there was a guy directly behind me, and when Paul was having his visions, he goes, I too dream of Zendaya. I thought that was really funny. Relatable. Like, did I see this movie because I love Zendaya? Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. To wrap up this episode, I think we should all like talk about the ending a little bit. So this movie had a very long runtime of 2.5 hours, and I know you said that they also left things out, but it is like quite a chunky book. Like a lot happens. How did you guys all feel about the ending? Like we can go around in a circle and just talk about it.
A lot of people said that it felt unfinished. And it was, they kind of ended on a weird spot, but I'd already read the book, so it wasn't a very big deal to me. It makes me a bit worried for the rest of the movies, but I think it was fine.
Yeah, I didn't know going into it that there was going to be the part 2 coming out in 2023. And there's also an HBO miniseries coming out next September about the Bene Gesserit. So if I had known that before watching this, I felt like I would have been more prepared. But I was kind of like, that was it? Like, the credits started rolling, and I was like, where's the rest of it? And I feel like maybe if they had gotten to that, like, kind of 2-year gap that was in the book, maybe it would have felt a little bit more finished, or if I had just, like, done my research before. But, I mean, overall, I, like, left the theater being like, yeah, I like that. I'll come back.
Yeah, I thought it ended in a weird place, but there was some sense of finality for me, because I feel like there was, the story was about to change in a big way, because, like, Paul and Jessica had kind of like made an alliance with the Fremen, and then at the last part of that scene, there's this like Paul and Chani look at each other, and like there's like this connection that they have, which I think a lot of Paul's visions were like building up to, and so I think to see like a little bit of resolution with that in like real time as opposed to in like, Paul's vision time was really helpful. And I think that like if there hadn't have been that moment, I would have been so confused. But I think like for an ending that did kind of end in a weird spot, like that closing off the, or just not closing off, but kind of bringing those visions to somewhere really helped.
I agree. It really seems like they're building a romance like plot. Is that like true to the books?
Yes, with Chani.
Yeah, so I guess we're assuming that there will be like romance going on in the next parts. I actually didn't know that there was going to be like a part 2 until the opening scene where it says Dune and then underneath part 1. I didn't know that. I like really did not know a lot going in, and I feel like I was very lost when it ended. I feel like more sure about what happened now that I've like done research. But the fact that I just, like, went to the bathroom at, like, the wrong time entirely. Like, I thought nothing was happening. Like, very little had happened up to that point. It was more just, like, discussing the politics. I go to the bathroom. I come back. I turn to my friend. I'm like, so, like, what did I miss? And she's like, everyone was murdered. Like, I missed, like, 3 big deaths that had, like, a huge impact on the plot. And so I had to read, like, so many synopsises to understand what happened. And it still got a little weird when I was trying to give my summary. So I was very confused when the movie ended, but upon like Googling what actually happened and being able to like know some of the context, I do feel like it had a good ending. Again, I did appreciate that major change in Paul's characters and his decision that he was going to like at least for a little while like become one of the Fremen and like kind of join their ranks. I thought that was a big like twist in the plot, and I do think the Fremen are like the most interesting part of the movie. And upon researching, like I found out some other things about them. Like it's an interesting like society, and they're not entirely nomadic. So I am excited to see part 2. Like I definitely want to know more about like the Fremen. I think like the indigenous people of Arrakis are like one of the most interesting parts of this movie. So I did like that it was leading to that. I don't know. Is there any like other thoughts that you guys have to say before we end this episode?
I believe it's on HBO Max. And so my parents wanted to watch it, so I watched it with them as well after seeing it in the theaters. And if you're able to, go see it in the theaters. It's so much better of an experience. It's like so much more immersive. And like, I don't know, I feel like I really got to like focus in, because if I was just at home and it's 2.5 hours, it's like, it's a little bit more than that or a little bit less, but like, I don't know if I would have had the same commitment, but it was just so much better of an experience, I think, in theaters.
I'm guessing with how like exact the time is, it's like exactly 2 hours and 35 minutes. So I'm like, they must have had to cut some things to get to that such a specific place. Like, I'm guessing editing it was rough. There's so much to encapsulate. And I'm sure they didn't want to get like attacked by Dune book fans being like, okay, well, that wasn't truthful at all to the book. I think there's like so much to cover. So I'm guessing that was probably a lot of editing had to happen. But it was still like a long movie. I liked it. I mean, I'm like maybe not as passionate as if I had like read all the books. I don't know. Did you like it compared to the book?
Well, the book was better.
Yeah.
They didn't edit out too much, but yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Well, I think if no one else has any like closing thoughts or anything, that closes up our episode. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
What's the film next week, Elizabeth?
Oh yeah, we're watching Zapped, another Zendaya movie. November might just be the month of Zendaya, to be honest. But yeah, tune in to see us review Zapped, the classic Disney Zendaya movie. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.